Hi, welcome to the Legislators Lounge. I'm Jim Webb, the host of the show, and the co-host is Brian Chirichiello. We're here today with Congressman Frank Guinta as our guest.
Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you very much to you both for having me.
We appreciate you coming on by and chatting with us a little bit. For the folks that may not know who you are, do you want to take a minute and tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'd be happy to. I previously served in the 112th Congress for one term representing the 1st Congressional District in New Hampshire, where I think I focus primarily, if you remember, on job creation, having job tours, job fairs all over the district, really trying to help the middle class find either a job or a better job. Prior to that, I had served for 2 terms as mayor of our state's largest city, Manchester. I was an alderman in the city for 2 terms prior to that, twice elected to the state legislature, had a small business prior to that. But my wife Morgan and I continue to raise our kids, Colby and Jack, in Manchester. We love New Hampshire, are raising 2 great kids who were born just up the street at Elliott, and looking forward to hopefully having the honor again of serving our state and our country as the next congressman for the 1st Congressional District.
Well, Congressman, we have lots of questions. People have a lot of questions, and one of the biggest questions right now that you see, and you're even starting to see some television commercials and things like that, and it's about this Obamacare and how it's going to affect jobs and how it's going to affect people losing their doctors, and there's not going to be enough hospitals because they're eliminating them. Could you tell us a little bit? I know because you were on the committee, on the budget committee when you were in the Congress, so could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. I opposed the Affordable Care Act from its inception. I didn't think it was the right way to achieve the overall objective that I think we all share, which is greater access and greater affordability. If you remember back when President Obama was unveiling the Affordable Care Act, that was his stated goal. We want to increase access and reduce the cost of health insurance and your overall health care. 2 laudable goals I think we all have. The difference, though, is how we would go about that. This is a very top-down, federally based piece of legislation. If you recall, the U.S. House of Representatives passed it before they even read the 2,300-page bill, something that we found in New Hampshire very discouraging. But this is a piece of legislation that mandates the requirement of purchasing of insurance, and if you do not purchase it, you will be fined by the federal government. Well, now we are getting into the implementation phase of this piece of legislation. When I was in the House in Washington, I voted a whole host of times to repeal all or portions of this piece of legislation, because of the damaging effect, I think, to the economy, to the tax system, to the individual who is trying to get better access, and the overall cost, which is tipping $1 trillion at this point. So here we are in New Hampshire now, where we've got only 16 of the hospitals in the state that are allowed to be in the exchange. You've got in our congressional district hospitals like Portsmouth Hospital or Frisbee in Rochester that have been excluded from the exchange, and out in the 2nd Congressional District you have Concord Hospital that chose not to be in the exchange. 3 pretty large areas where you've got high population, where people are not going to be able to continue to access their doctor or their hospital. Now, if you recall, those who supported this bill, people like Senator Shaheen and Congresswoman Shea Porter, not only voted for it and supported it, but both have claimed that if you like your doctor, you can keep it. There are going to be great benefits. Well, that is proving to be false. Right. And what I think our goal should be is to find a way to drive cost down, create greater competition in the state of New Hampshire, so whether you are on an individual plan, or if you get your plan through a large employer or a small employer, or whether you buy direct, you should be able to have that greater competition, greater choice, a plan that fits for you personally and your family, and you should be able to access a greater number of physicians, not a smaller number of physicians. So needless to say, a lot of people in New Hampshire don't support the Affordable Care Act, don't like it, are concerned about what does this mean for them moving forward. And if you remember earlier last year, Anthem had in their individual market of 30,000 people eliminated, as a direct result of the Affordable Care Act, 20 to 22,000 people of the 30,000 that they insured in the individual market. I have met actually people who have told me from New Hampshire who had their insurance policy canceled as a result of the Affordable Care Act. One gentleman I met with, family of 4, said he was healthy, you know, he and his wife and his 2 kids, healthy, owns his own small business, said that he eventually found a new policy with a higher deductible, and he was paying $650 per month more than under his old policy. So when people talk about this, do I say, you know, was health care or the health insurance issues relevant prior to the Affordable Care Act? Yes. Do we want to try to make insurance at that time more affordable? Absolutely. But this piece of legislation continues to cost us in excess of $1 trillion just for this federal subsidy. We've only had a small percentage of people sign up in order to make it viable.
That's a big one that I actually noticed, that was that out of the 348 million people in this country, it's only like 2 million people signed up for it. And out of that, they're trying to collect the money, and these people aren't even paying for the policy yet, so the 75% of them haven't even paid anything. So it's like a lose-lose.
Well, outside of the policy issue of the Affordable Care Act, you also then have the implementation. We've obviously had significant problems with the website. There are safety challenges with the website. When you put your own personal data, your social security number, your date of birth, your name, verification of your employment, verification of your income so they can adjust what the cost is for you, we're being told by different federal agencies that none of that is even working properly yet. So you have not just the policy issue that people don't support in New Hampshire and around the country, but now you have the implementation, which has been exceedingly costly. And I've seen and heard story after story of people who have tried to sign up, couldn't sign up, and that's a challenge. I mean, the period to sign up is about a month away. That closes. You only have around 2 million people. They needed a minimum of 7 million just to make it viable financially from HHS's perspective. That's with a $1 trillion subsidy.
Right. You think they'll extend it again? I mean, they've extended it one other time prior to that.
I think
to try to make it work.
They very well could at some point. They need, you know, they've extended it so much that at some point they're going to have to stop extending it and be honest, I think, with the American public that, you know, well, maybe, you know, this well-intentioned bill that became extremely onerous, that people didn't read when it was voted into law, and there was a reason that people like myself were opposing this when I served in Congress, because we saw, you know, the significant challenges, not just the tax hikes, but the lack of choice that we were anticipating people were going to have. Right. Now that that's happening, where Anthem, you know, dropped 20 to 22,000 people as a direct result of the bill, because now we've got only 16 hospitals at your disposal, you have lost choice and you have had a higher cost as a direct result of this piece of legislation. That's not good government, and that's not what I think, you know, good people in New Hampshire want to see in terms of trying to improve the healthcare system.
Now, I see that when you listen to all this, and I know the Congress, which is Republican controlled right now, has opposed. They actually wanted to delay it, and it didn't make it through the Senate. But and then all of a sudden now they want to delay it. So it's like first they didn't want to delay it, now they want to delay it. So the people are confused.
The interesting thing about this was when going back to September and October of last year, Republicans in the House of Representatives were looking for ways to delay the bill because House members, both Republican and Democrat, were being told that they weren't ready for implementation. So in exchange, in this whole trying to reduce expenditures at the federal level, the idea was, well, let's delay some of the Affordable Care Act implementation. The President and the Senate Democrats said no. So you had the government shutdown. Eventually that got resolved. And fast forward to now the President is doing exactly what Republicans were asking in the delays to work out the kinks, to allow this to function in a more effective way. So it seems like it's political rather than about good government.
They did kind of make it like it was the Republicans' fault. But, you know, as you and I both know, it wasn't any particular, it was the program wasn't working. And if we were to implement it at that time, or when we did it, just look at all the people that couldn't get on the website and they couldn't connect.
And those issues are still happening. You don't have the website that's 100% functional. You still have the back end work on the security side that's not functional, and there's been more testimony recently in different Senate and House committees where that's been proven. So we've got a real challenge here of not just the policy of the bill that people don't like and the cost of the bill, but also the implementation, which is not working either. So I think we're at a point where people are appreciating and understanding what Republicans are trying to do in really help those who truly needed better access, more affordability. It's just not happening with this piece of legislation. So, and again, in New Hampshire, we're getting a direct effect from it, not just Anthem, you know, unfortunately having to get rid of 22,000 people, but, you know, we've got 7,000 people in the city of Rochester who, as a direct result of this legislation, are no longer able to see their doctor or Frisbee Hospital. And that certainly didn't seem to be the intent at the time.
And that was not the promise that the Democrats had
Correct.
mentioned. You know, if you wanted to keep your doctor, you could do that. And I want to talk about the exchange. Anthem is a monopoly, as we all know. We didn't anticipate
Sure.
one player on this field here. But I understand that you've been going to some of the you had mentioned Frisbee, some of the hospitals that have been excluded out of Anthem.
So I started about a month ago a healthcare listening tour. I think it's very important when you serve that you've got to listen to the people that you represent, whether they agree with you or disagree with you. So I have been making stops within the healthcare industry, hospitals, senior centers, doctors, to get a sense of, okay, tell me what the impacts of the Affordable Care Act are, whether they're good or bad.
Right.
Tell me those impacts. One of the stops I made was Frisbee, and I learned at that stop that as a direct result of being excluded from the exchange in New Hampshire, again, because of the Affordable Care Act, 7,000 of the patients that they were seeing who were uninsured at the time, they will not be able to see them now, and those individuals will have to go 30 miles away to try to get care. Now, some of the patients we're talking about are people who don't have access to proper transportation.
Right.
So here you had Frisbee, who was doing a great thing for the local community, figured out a way to make the cost side of it work. So those people in their community that didn't have insurance were at least being treated. Now that group of people, 7,000, can't go to Frisbee and can't go see their doctor. And again, you know, to me, that's not the goal here. That is not the goal. I mean, the goal is to try to, you know, get people to have better access and to get the quality care that they need. But this bill, that again, you know, is obviously supported. It was a party line vote. I mean, it was 100% of the Democrats supported it, 100% of the Republicans did not, because of exactly things like this that are now happening.
Right.
And even up north, it's even more of a problem because you have further distances. And as everybody knows, New Hampshire does not have public transportation. It's a rural state.
Yeah,
so.
Imagine if you're an uninsured veteran living, you know, anywhere in the North Country, anywhere, whether it's Congressional District 1 or Congressional District 2, you have very limited choice. you don't have a lot of access to begin with. And this is just restricting the choice, and in many circumstances, again, increasing the cost. So, what I'd like to see, again, is a more market-based approach where, for example, one thing we can do, and I've talked to our insurance commissioner about this, is regionalizing northern New England. Rather than look at us through state-based boundaries, look at the entire geographic area, encourage more carriers to come into the state so there are more choice, more options. And that gives, for example, somebody who lives in Rochester, who lives on the Maine border, more access to physicians, whether they're in Maine or whether they're in New Hampshire. The insurance commissioner says we can do this. You need cooperative agreements. So you need the federal delegations to work with the governors and the state representatives and state senators of the states that would be part of this kind of geographic model. But I think northern New England would be great for that, given our proximity to the other states and where some of our population is on some of these borders, whether it's Vermont, Maine, or Massachusetts.
Right, absolutely. And was Parkland Hospital one of the hospitals that was not included?
I will find that out. I'm visiting Parkland.
I believe it is.
I believe it is. And Parkland Hospital in Derry is important because they're one of our major employers now.
I'm visiting with Parkland over the next couple of weeks, so I'd be happy to come back and report, from Parkland's perspective, not just how the Affordable Care Act has impacted them and the Derry community, but the other issues that they're going through. The other issue, if I could just talk about it for a minute, that I heard about and continue to hear, and I know that Derry is affected by this, is the mental health challenges in our state. Yep. You saw a lot about what happened at Elliott over the last 12 months or so. There's a big challenge with mental health issues in our state. I have a family member who's affected by mental illness, and my extended family has done a lot to help this individual. I am a direct caregiver for this person in our family, and it's about the dignity of quality of life for somebody. It's about making sure that they have access when they need it, particularly when they're in an acute situation. And unfortunately, our state right now is not well equipped to handle it. And I'll give you an example. If you have someone present to Derry, to Parkland, that has some sort of mental illness, because most hospitals in our state are not equipped for that kind of patient, you would typically triage the individual and then get them up to Concord, except we don't have enough beds in Concord.
Right.
So this is a significant problem that affects just about every community. It becomes a safety issue for those employees at the different hospitals throughout our state. So it's something that I'm personally engaged in and want to make sure that there's a voice for mental health. More than almost 30% of our communities are affected one way or another by mental health. And if we can at least encourage people to get a little more educated about it, release the negative stigmatism towards somebody who's mentally ill, I let people know that, look, if you have a mental illness, you didn't ask for it. It's not like a broken arm that can heal in 6 weeks. It's something far more challenging, but it affects a lot of our friends and neighbors. And I'm, working with a lot of people to try to improve the scenario and situation in the state of New Hampshire.
That's great.
Yeah, Parkland itself is the largest taxpayer in Derry, the largest employer in Derry. So it is very important to Derry that this Affordable Care Act doesn't affect or minimizes the effect on Parkland, because if it was not able to function, I mean, there'd be people losing their jobs, and they're just trickle-down effect, But I'll lead into, since I mentioned that the employing part of the Obamacare, I just wanted to mention that how this is actually kind of stimulating or stifling the job creators to a minimum of 50 employees, or they have to take this plan. So some people aren't expanding because they're afraid to, because they might have to buy insurance.
Yeah, this is a significant problem. So 80% of the businesses in New Hampshire are small businesses, and we want to see economic growth in the state. So rather than come down with existing or higher taxes on existing businesses. You want more businesses to come here, and you want those existing businesses to grow. So there is a direct correlation between the effects of the Affordable Care Act and how a company is going to look at their 5-year model. So if you are an employer of 45 people, you are technically not governed by the Affordable Care Act. But as soon as you hit that 50th employee, there are requirements and mandates that are going to be placed on you that are just not affordable, including, you know, the accounting mechanism that you are as an employer required and obligated to pay for or be responsible for. So you have companies that, and I've heard from companies that are on that cusp, you know, close to 50 employees, are trying to figure out can they expand or do they just not expand? And that's, you know, in an unemployment market like we have in this country, that is a counterweight to job growth and economic growth. Right. So there are, again, maybe an unintended consequence, but when I go back to people didn't read this bill when they voted for it, there are components like that that I think if they read it, maybe you know they would have changed things. Now, you know, we've heard from our the current delegation that's up for election this year on the federal level have all doubled down on the Affordable Care Act. All have said that they like it, they support it. So it's discouraging because they're not listening to what the average people in New Hampshire are saying. The average people in New Hampshire are saying, look, we don't like this piece of legislation. We would like our choice back, and we would like our old policies back that are less costly than these new policies that we have to go find.
Is that feasible? Could that happen? Can we get rid of this bill? How can we?
Well, look, I think 2012 was the opportunity with the 2012 election, and obviously the president won re-election. The state Senate, the U.S. Senate, excuse me, stayed Democrat. The House stayed Republican. So I think the next opportunity to substantially change anything, given the fact that the Republicans in Washington are in the minority, they run the House, but they don't have the Senate, and you don't have the White House. And because there's such differing opinions amongst the parties as to how to resolve this issue, I think the next possible opportunity is the 2014 election cycle. And imagine if the United States Senate goes from Democrat to Republican, we can then, and the House remains Republican, we can then start to work with the president because we've got greater leverage on trying to fix and solve some of the challenges within the Affordable Care Act. And that really is my goal. Let's try to, I mean, again, I still support repealing it, getting rid of it, and trying to find, you know, a better alternative to reduce cost and to create a greater choice. But the farther away you get from the date that it was passed, the more difficult it becomes.
I think we have one crack at it in the next election, I think, personally.
Well,
but
I mean, you think about it from a tax perspective, how many taxes have been implemented that ever get repealed?
Right.
It's just an unfortunate reality sometimes.
Well, as a member of the legislature, we look at that every day we're up there because everything has an effect. So, you know, you have to really be careful with that because, especially taxes, New Hampshire, we don't want to pay anymore. It's a live free or die state. We don't want to pay more taxes if we don't have to. We're already paying enough, as we all know, that own homes. We're paying a lot of money for our taxes, and the services we get are excellent. And New Hampshire has some of the most educated people. Mm-hmm. We have a lot to offer to the rest of the country. As a matter of fact, most of our young people now get educated here and leave. So
which we want to change that. I mean, we're a graying state, as well as the number of younger people that graduate high school, or the number of people that are leaving after they get a high school degree and then leaving to get their advanced degree outside of New Hampshire. That number is increasing. So this is a long-term challenge that New Hampshire is having, and we've got to turn that around. And I think we can make New Hampshire more attractive by being competitive in 3 areas. Economically, we've got to be more competitive. You've got to have more job opportunities for individuals. There's got to be more connectivity between the business community and our schools. But secondly, the cost of education drives these decisions. If you can get a better, equal or better education outside of the state than in the state, you're hard-pressed to make that decision not to leave. So that's a second component that we've got to try to address in the state of New Hampshire. And third, I love New Hampshire. You love New Hampshire. I've got young kids. You know, my wife and I very much enjoy raising our family here. But our kids are 10 and 9. When you're 17, 18, 19, your perspective changes a little bit, right? So, you know, we need sort of that tech economy that encourages younger people to stay here. We need that portion of our economy to grow. So those are areas that I think if we continue to work on as community leaders, you can start to see the shift change in terms of, instead of people leaving, more people coming to the state. Yeah.
And one of the issues that we had mentioned before in one of our other shows were energy costs. I mean, to attract business here in the Northeast, we always see the electricity is very high. You know, especially this winter, it's been cold with oil costs. You know, how do we kind of turn the corner there on energy issues?
Yeah, for oil, I mean, just because of the topography of our state, you know, you've got a lot of customers that are oil. And for my house, for example, I can't get a gas line to natural gas, at least to my home. I can get propane, but I couldn't get anything other than oil.
We've been burning wood.
Well, a lot of people are doing
pellets.
that. Yeah, wood pellets.
Wood and pellets. We have both. But when the pellet stove stays running when we're not home, just so it doesn't get that cold in the house.
Well, right, you know, 100 gallons of oil is probably, you know, around $380, $395, depending on who your service provider is.
Right.
That's just for 100 gallons.
That's a lot of money.
That doesn't. 100 gallons doesn't take you that far of oil. So
not on when we have these cold days like we're having today.
And we're going to have a whole nother cold stretch that's going to last, you know, 7 to 10 days. So, you know, 100 gallons just does not go as far as it used to. So this is one of the challenges of the Northeast. All right, we do have higher energy costs, but again, bringing in more choice, more options for how we provide energy can be an effective tool to bring the overall cost of energy down. And that's a regional challenge, it's a New Hampshire challenge. But when you look at the other indicators of what CEOs look at when they want to move their business or create a new business, they look at other indicators. Our taxes for businesses are high. We're one of the highest tax states in the country as a direct result of that. So we're in about the middle of the pack compared to other states overall, with the overall rankings that CEOs consider. But you need to be in the top 10 in order to be competitive. If you're not in that top 10, there's no reason to be looked at unless that CEO has some direct relationship with the state. Maybe they were born and raised here, they have family here. But a CEO's got to be, you know, considerate of all the other issues: skilled workforce, energy costs, transportation issues, as well as the tax structure. Those are things that we've got to improve in order to be more competitive, grow the economy, and ensure that we don't have higher taxes on the existing tax base in our state.
No, I know that you are a supporter of any form of energy that we can get, and being a congressman, of course, you have to consider the entire country when you're voting. And you were very supportive of the pipeline that we still haven't seen yet.
Yeah. Well, the pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline, would have created in stages more than 100,000 jobs, not all at once, but over in stages, through multiple parts of the country. There was no rational reason, in my view, to hold this up. Now, the president, it needs a presidential approval at this point. We have pushed, when I was in the House, multiple times, the encouragement of approving the Keystone Pipeline. The president had always talked about he was waiting for the EPA to make their announcement and decision. Well, that just came out. And miraculously, the EPA said that there is no impact, that there won't be any environmental impact for passing the Keystone Pipeline. So I think now the president is in a bit of a challenge here because the economy desperately wants more jobs.
Right.
We would love to be self-sufficient in terms of our energy, where we get our energy. We don't want to be importing it from other countries.
Right.
And we would like to have multiple options for energy production. And you're talking about jobs that are on the average about $90,000 a year. We're not
Those
talking
are good paying jobs.
Yeah, we're not talking about low paying jobs. These are really high paying jobs. So we'd like to see that happen. I can't tell you what the president's going to do, but when you start having I kid about it, but you've got Republicans and you've got unions all saying, hey, look, we need this for the country. So if the unions can come around to agree with the Republicans, that tells me that you've got enough people with varied interests, varied perspectives ideologically that want to see this pipeline happen.
Well, and this pipeline itself is a huge thing because it's kind of like a trickle down. What I see when I look at that is, okay, well, if we have 45, for instance, in this country, 45% of the people are collecting some sort of benefit from the government, some unemployment, whatever it happens to be, right? Those people aren't paying taxes. So if they're not paying taxes, the government's not getting the revenue. So if they're not getting the revenue, we have this huge debt that just keeps rolling over and rolling over. And while I'm on it, might as well talk about the debt and that fiscal cliff we were going to go over. It seems like they just keep making the cliff a little further away, but it's still going to happen. That's the way I look at it.
Well, the country has a debt number of about $17 trillion. It continues to grow. This president has added more than any other president in this period of time debt to our nation. It is a significant problem that we all should be concerned about. I mean, when I was in Congress, it was about $50,000 per American. It's already actually climbed from that number, which is astronomical, to closer to $60,000 now. That's I mean, you think about, you work hard, you want your kids to you help them to go to school. They get through college. They get, obviously they're going to come out of college with some debt, and then on top of that, you've got, $50,000 to $60,000 in debt for our future generations. It puts us at a disadvantage as a nation. So, the one thing that we were able to do that I thought was beneficial through passing the Budget Control Act was reduce the deficit. Now, a lot of Democrats are starting to take credit for that, but that happened because Republicans stood strong and said, look, we've got to get our debt and deficit under control. So we got the Budget Control Act, which reduced expenditures on a portion of the budget that we can control, the discretionary side, which is only 1/3 of the national budget. The other 2/3 is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. And those costs continue to climb. They're on autopilot, increasing anywhere from 7% to 9% per year. We've got to get our hands around that, make sure that we preserve and protect important policies and programs for people, but not at the expense of bankrupting the nation. So what I'd like to see, again, is a modification of our tax code, so we can have economic growth again in this country, be more competitive with other nations. We have the highest corporate tax rate than almost anyone else in the world. And why is that important? Because let's take a company like Apple. Most people have Apple products of some sort. Apple is on average netting $7 billion per quarter in overseas profits. Now imagine if those profits were here in America.
Right.
There's revenue to the Treasury, there's research and development money that they utilize with those profits for new products, there's job creation here in America.
Infrastructure.
There's infrastructure growth here in America.
I could tell you my company, I work for Anheuser-Busch. It was bought by a foreign company. The very first thing they did is cut all capital improvements. That's $1 billion a year that did not go into this economy, because they stopped.
Into the United
States. It was just cut right then and boom, no more capital improvements, stop everything. So, and you're talking a company that was very profitable.
Oh, sure.
You know, making $7 to $10 billion a year.
Yeah. No, it was profitable to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's see, this is part of the challenge that we have. How do we get more competitive with the world? How do we have more startups here in this country, more companies going on to our local exchanges in America instead of overseas exchanges? And our tax system, again, it's antiquated. It hasn't been updated since '86. I mean, it is antiquated. It's not developed to be strategic for the 21st century. Oh. And that's a concern of mine. So at least the Republicans came out this last week with a proposal. It's a blueprint. It's not, you know, what's going to be the end-all be-all of this, but we're trying to talk about things that will move the country forward, create that job opportunity here, and create the next Apple or the next Anheuser-Busch here in America, because that's something that's going to benefit our local communities, our American economy.
Yeah, because you do actually get the filter down effect too on that. Like, for instance, a plant in a certain community will donate to the community, right? So you get all that side of it, which is the donations and stuff.
Well, I mean, look at Anheuser-Busch. I mean, down in Merrimack.
Yeah.
You know, the things that they do for the local community is incredible. If you stop, so we want to see that growth for any company, right? that looks at their community and says, you know, I want to participate in the community. Coca-Cola is another local community company in Londonderry that does a great job of trying to make sure that, you know, they are locally engaged. Actually, as a matter of fact, both of those companies, when I was doing my job fairs, participated, looking for people to hire based on the job fairs that we were doing. So there was opportunity because they cared about the local community. So we want to encourage that growth, that economic development, and I fear right now that that the stagnation is really what the challenge is for us.
Let me, I need to get a question in.
Okay, yeah.
So we all know about the gridlock in Washington. So I want to know, if you're elected, how are you going to work across party lines? And maybe you want to touch upon when you were a mayor in Manchester, being in the minority party.
Sure.
How did you get things done?
Well, you know, I loved being mayor of Manchester. I mean, it's a great city, largest city in the state. We don't have elections with the R&D after your name. Right. Everybody knows who the Republican is, and everybody knows who the Democrat is, right? So we had, I got elected back in '05, started serving in '06 for 2 terms. And I had a pretty bold agenda. I really wanted to focus on cutting taxes, cutting spending, improving education, investing in our police department, and growing our economy overall, and growing the downtown. I think we did a pretty good job, and we cut taxes for the first time. We cut borrowing in half. Wow. Spent a lot of resources in improving the police department, much needed, but we had a big drug problem back then, and we got rid of some of the problem bars and nightclubs that really tried to make downtown Manchester a more family-friendly environment. Right. So we were able to succeed in putting an agenda together, and at the time we had 14 aldermen. You know, 2 were Republican, 1 was an independent, and 11 were Democrat. Yet we still got things accomplished. Fast forward to when I was in Congress, you know, I got 3 pieces of legislation signed into law by this president in 1 term.
That's good.
Despite the fact, now they were not monumental pieces of legislation, but one had to do with fraud in transportation. One had to do with how we do our survey work in the country, allowing the option for 3D to make things easier and less expensive. But you know, that kind of legislation matters to people because it sends a message that yes, despite having differences of opinion with a different person from a different political party, you can get things accomplished. That's what I think New Hampshire wants to see. They want someone who's independent-minded. They want someone who's got bold ideas. They want someone who also can work along across party lines. And I've been able to demonstrate that in every area of my public service.
Right. All right, well, we're pretty much out of time here, so if you'd like to say any last words before we leave.
Well, I want to thank you for having me on. Derry's a great place. I've spent a lot of time. Derry was one of the first stops I made when I was campaigning a number of years ago. I spent a lot of time here. We'll continue to do so and ask the people of Derry to support Frank Guinta for Congress and make sure that they get their voice heard on issues that are important to them, the economic issue, the health care issue, growing our economy. But I'll continue to come back and invite people to go to teamguinta.com to support the effort. All
right, and well, thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
This has been the Legislators Lounge. You can find us on the web by going to www.derrylounge.com. We also have a Facebook page, which is Legislators Lounge. Just search it on Facebook. And we also have a YouTube channel, which you'll be able to watch this video as well as all our other videos that we've done. So once again, thank you for being with us, and see you soon.